This first video will give you the initial steps on setting up a maze or a maze game using GameMaker. And this is GameMaker Studio. So when you open GameMaker Studio, you'll get a screen like this. It's blank at the moment. You want to click on New, and then it will ask you where you want to save the game or the file and what you want to name it. So I'm going to the directory. I'm going to select my name. I'm going to Google Drive, Data, and Game On files, wherever they are. There they are. And OK. So that sets up the folder in which I want to save the files, and I'm going to call this Maze. And I'm going to create that. Alright, so what I've done now is I've set up and you see up the top, Maze project game. This comes up all the time. It's a bit of news. You can just close that. It's not important. Now, once we've opened GameMaker Studio, the three most important parts of this that we're going to use to set up the game are the following: sprites, objects, and room. A sprite is effectively the graphic element of what we use in the game. What we move around, what we have as objects, and I'll explain that in a minute, are all initially set up by using a sprite. So with a sprite, all we need to do is pull in a graphic file and to make what we want. Now, to set up a sprite, we'll do the following. We click on, obviously, create a sprite, and it will ask us for a name. It'll ask us also to load the sprite, and that's where we can pick up a graphic file. Or we can edit a sprite, which means we can make a sprite ourselves, or we can upload a graphic and then actually modify it. So we're going to load a sprite. So where do we find it? We find it in data. We're going to find it in Game On. Whoops, up one more. Now you'll have access to this from myself. I'll share it with you, and you'll have access to these folders. So the first folder we're going to is the RES 051, and we're going to look at wood, and we're going to take a block of wood. Why do we do that? Well, we're setting up the walls of our maze, and to do that we're going to use blocks of wood. So we're going to call the sprite SPR, short for sprite, underscore, and I'll just turn the capital up, so we'll try that again, SPR underscore wood. What that tells us is it's a bit of wood and it's a sprite. Okay, so now we've saved a sprite. Now we also want to make another sprite, and that's going to be that's going to be the object that moves around, and we're going to use a cat. So we load sprite again. This time we're going to, we'll try again. There's lots of different sprites on these. I think it's this one, sprites, nature, and we're going to look for cat. Yep, there is and cat. We're going to call this SPR underscore cat. No surprises there now. The reason you name the file either sprite or object or whatever is that it's easy to know exactly what it refers to. Okay, and then finally we need cat to collect something, so we're going to make a bird. So we load the sprite, we find a bird, and there's one just down here somewhere. Yep, there it is. We're going to call this obviously SPR underscore bird, and OK. So there are our 3 sprites. Now before we can do anything with them in the game, we actually have to set up objects. And the objects takes the graphic element, which is the sprite, and puts it into a container, if you like. And that container can then have, it can then be involved in events, or instead of being involved, actually, it can receive instructions from you in regards to its behavior according to events. So in other words, it'll say if an event happens, then do whatever, and you'll provide those instructions. So we've got our sprites, we now make our objects, and it's pretty simple really. To create an object, we just click on an object. We're going to call the first one, guess what, obj underscore wood. It's going to be solid, and I'll explain why in a minute. And we're going to use the sprite wood. Makes sense, doesn't it? We don't have to worry about any of this other stuff, and OK. And there's our first object. The second object is a cat, obj underscore cat. It's going to be solid again, and it's going to use the cat sprite. OK. And our third object is going to be obj underscore bird. It's going to be solid. And it's going to use the bird sprite, and that's it. Good. So there's our 3 sprites, our 3 objects. We're now ready to set up our room. So to set up a new room, we go to create a room, and we're going to call that, we'll leave that as room 0. We won't worry about that. What we then need to do is to look at our objects. At the moment it's at views, so we click on objects, and at the moment we've got object wood. If you come down here to the list, it will show you that we've got 3 objects. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the wood to make walls of our maze. So once we've got the woods there, we can just click, click, click. Oh. And as you click, you can see that you're building a wall. If you want to go sideways, you just click sideways, and 1 click each time you make an next bit of the wall. If you make a bit of a stuff up, easy to fix, right click the wood that's in error and then delete, and it disappears straight away. So we'll make our maze. Okay, well there's a simple maze that we've now made up. What we're going to do now is add the cat object. That's the one we're going to move around. So we click on our object list and go to cat object. We only want 1 cat, so we just click cat, and there it is, right there. And then it's going to collect birds as it wanders around, so we can just put a few birds around the place. One thing is important is that when you make your maze, is you make these pathways, if you like, wide enough for your sprite to move around. You can, through the modify sprite, make it smaller, make the object smaller by varying the sprite, but you just need to be aware that if you can't fit between the two, it's going to make your maze very difficult to get around. So you need to think about that carefully. Okay, so what we've done here is we've made our maze with our walls, we've set up our object birds around the maze, and we've set up our cat, which we're going to move around, and that is the first step of making a maze.